The author C.D. Murphy writes, in Ireland, you go to someone's house and she asks you if you want a cup of tea. And you say, no thank you, you're just really quite fine. And she asks again if you're sure. And you say, of course you're sure, really, don't need a thing. Well, then she says, I was going to get myself some anyway, so it wouldn't be any trouble. Ah, you say, well, if you're going to get some yourself anyway, I wouldn't mind a spot of tea, and so long as it's no trouble and give you a hand in the kitchen. So you go through the whole thing again over in the kitchen until a long time later you finally end up around the kitchen counter drinking tea and chatting. In America, if somebody asks you if you want a cup of tea, you say no, and the matter is dropped and you never get any tea. She concludes this little section saying, I like the Irish way better. That is to say, prayer. Prayer is not a transaction, the way that she describes American ways of asking for tea, or not asking for tea for that matter. It's not a transaction, it's an interaction. It's two people working together, two God and people working together, working out stuff together, the stuff of life, the stuff of everyday living. And in that interaction, there's kind of this mutual thing going on. You know, there's friendship being built or changed. Stuff happens. Yeah? We talk to somebody, stuff happens. Stuff happens to you, stuff happens to them. Even if it's just a more or less simple conversation. You know? When you look at Abraham in prayer, yeah, that's prayer. We talked about it last week. Yes, that's prayer. Abraham is there in the heat of this desert sun, arguing with God whether or not, you know Sodom and Gomorrah. I know what you're going to do. Could you please, what if there's people there that, you know what I'm saying? Or if there's some righteous people there, we couldn't wipe away the righteous with the unjust, could we? That wouldn't be right, right? And so he argues with God here quite nicely. Notice that the sentence, Abraham, give it up. I know darn well there aren't 10 righteous people there. It's never spoken. All right? Instead, the two, God and Abraham, are having this conversation with each other, about what we're going to do about, what we're going to do about Sodom and Gomorrah. This is the same Abraham who God has called out of Ur, who is kind of off on a lamb. He's kind of off on a whim, and is never so quite sure it's through all his life that what God is all about. Pretty much until he comes here, and this is how Abraham does indeed change in this encounter between God and Abraham. You remember the story of Abraham, right? Yes? Okay, what's his original name? Okay, I got one person who has the right answer, but she didn't say it loud enough, so everybody else is still on the hook.
Abram.
Abram, right? So, okay, so you know the story of Abraham. They'll save a lot of time, so I don't have to retell it from scratch. Abraham is called out of nowhere, and there always is this question: am I just seeing things, or is God actually ever real? In the interaction at the Oak of Mamre, there is this beautiful little section where Abraham and Sarah, both in their 80s, hear well, both in their 80s are told by God, you will have a son, Isaac. He will be born of Sarah. By that time, they've already kind of taken things into their own hands. Okay? By that time, we have this other son from a slave girl. The kid's named Ishmael. And as the Bible coldly observes, Ishmael becomes a never-ending thorn in the side of the descendants of Isaac. Ishmael is Abraham and Sarah taking things into their own hands. Isaac is God working in patience. Isaac is an answer to prayer. Ishmael is, well, Abraham and Sarah trying to work out the answer to their own prayers themselves. You can try to answer your own prayers. Do you know that? You're aware of that, right? But that's a transaction that you kind of make with yourself. It's about this tea again, you know? If the answer was no, does that mean you drop the conversation? Does it mean you drop the relationship? So if you live in a tiny little village in the middle of nowhere, in dusty eastern countries where Jesus trods, and your day to be allowed to use the community often happens to be Thursday, and now it's Monday, and the bread that you have is all gone, but your friend next door had his bread baking day that morning, and now you have company coming over. What do? None of you have neighbors, do you? None of you have neighbors. See, this is one of those things where we don't understand the scripture for the simple reason that if I have company coming over and I'm out of bread, you know, gee whiz, you know, the place is down in Bechtel Avenue, open 24/7, you know. Okay, just wait a while, I'll be right back. And we got this fixed. In these days, you know, you have and your neighbor doesn't, and your neighbor needs to be hospitable to somebody. Will you be the one, as a neighbor, to not be a neighbor? And what's the word say? Because of their persistence, the man behind the door comes to his senses and gives. But it's not really all that much the persistence. It's the fact that they are neighbors. That's the persistence, if you so will. The morning will come when everybody walks out in the light of day and they will look at each other and they will look at each other grudgingly, or they will look at each other as neighbors. The day will come when you stand before God. Will you stand there grudgingly for the things that maybe didn't work out pretty well, and all the troubles that life has given you? You know, I mean, those of you who have sat under this pulpit for the last 20 years know how my Julys tend to grow, you know. In July, my Julys tend to be just this large pack of bad luck and bad fortune. Things break in July at my house. All right? I mean, this never fails. Troubles like that ensue in July. And will I go in front of my Maker and look at him and say, what was this about July about? Will I go there grudgingly? If I do, then it's an interaction, these prayers of mine, and not the larger development of a relationship between God and I, between Jesus and I, that Jesus had led me into this relationship with Jesus, with God the Father, was heaven itself. And we say in the Lord's Prayer, Our Father, so as to make it clear that we talk of not to some strange impersonal force or but we're conducting some transaction with something up in heaven. It's an address at something very personal. Something with whom maybe a cup of tea would be a lovely thing. or coffee if you don't that mind. Prayer, my friends, is tending. It's tending relationships. For God certainly knows how many righteous there are in Donaldsville, or in New Carlisle for that matter, or in Fairborn, in your 10 children. So is New Carlisle, but we won't talk about that.
Donaldsville doesn't have 10.
No, it has to be 5 because we're small. But look what we do. We're a working transaction again. It's a relationship, my friends. It's an interaction, not a transaction. It's sort of a dance, if you so will. And the dance of the cross through life of the people. That God and Jesus Christ, who walks this earth as the one who is crucified, who in the Spirit is still within all of us, tends this relationship between us and heaven, and we tend it along with Him. And in that we are changed. Somehow. And God has changed too. Did you realize that? If you look at the story of Abraham at the Oak of Mormon, there's an odd little piece there. After Abraham has fed the visitors, the words of the Bible are, and God said to himself, shall I keep myself from Abraham? Shall I keep secrets from Abraham? Or shall I tell him what I am about to do? The relationship between Abraham and God is changing. And so God's heart changes there too. And He says, I will tell Abraham what I'm about to do. So yes, heaven is not unmoldable, but it's the relationship God has with His children that molds heaven. Those of you who deal with little ones on a regular basis know that the voices of children sometimes, well, usually, melt hearts. Their tears bring tears to your eyes. So yes, even the God whom we claim to love, the God in Jesus Christ, God Father, now and again changes, and heaven changes with Him. And it's all done because everybody involved cares. He calls us children, and we call Him Father. And sometimes His no is just a temporary thing. And sometimes His no is a blessing. But it's always, always our Father. Amen.